Well, the original reason was because, probably because of my father. He was a teacher, and he always wore a suit, even in the 70s when that started to become, like 1950s thing. And I asked him one time why he did that, and he said it was to show respect for his students. And then when I was a professor, well, when you start to be a professor, you're not that much difference in age from your students to begin with. It's a good way of laying out a demarcation, and that was helpful. That's useful. People like to know how the hierarchies are delineated.
Right.
And professors like to think that they're everybody's buddy, but that's not the right relationship. And so that was helpful. And then when I went on tour in 2018, I realized that I was going to speak live in front of several 100,000 people over the course of the tour. And I thought, you got to think when you have an opportunity like that if you had the least amount of sense, you'd pull out all the stops. So I bought some expensive suits. And then one of the things that happened in consequence of that was that people started to come to the lectures in suits. And so I'd say about 40% of the audience dresses formally. And lots of the young guys who come, they tell me when I meet them afterwards in the meet and greets, for example, that they bought their first suit to come to the lectures. Because if you're going to move into the zone of the transcendent, you have to take on the requisite responsibility, or the process of transcendence turns into something like a descent into unstructured chaos. And that's not an improvement. It's just a movement from tyranny into the desert. That's a good way of thinking about it symbolically. So what happens in the Exodus story, because it also details out how this should be structured, is that Moses has a vision of individual responsibility and social organization that's maximally responsibility based. So Moses tells the Pharaoh to let his people go, but that's not the phrase. The phrase is God tells Moses to say this. He's, let my people go so they may worship me in the desert. And so you move out of the tyranny. That's what happens, let's say, in the throes of a psychedelic experience, is that the preconceptions are shattered. Now you're somewhere unstructured. Okay, well, you can't worship what's unstructured. You have to find the proper structuring for your new freedom. The vision that's put forward in the book of Exodus is a vision of multidimensional, responsible identity. So you take on responsibility for your own life. You take on responsibility for the life of your wife or your husband. You take on responsibility for your family. You're a model for your community. You serve your state. You do what you can for your nation, and that's all united under your... It's important. There's two things that are important to me, likely. One is I'm not going to let a pack of ideologically addled moralists, lying moralists who are facilitating the butchery and sterilization of children, take away my license, not without a war. So that's one thing. The second thing is I'm in a prime position in Canada to undertake this battle against the woke licensing boards, because I have the money, and what the hell are they going to do to me? I'm not practicing.
Right.
They can't take away my income, and
Right.
likely they can't blacken my reputation, except among those who are willing to assume that the licensing colleges are playing a straight game. So really there's nothing they can do to me. Plus, if it was only a personal thing, apart from the fact that I'm not letting my license be taken by a pack of intellectually addled hypocrites, there's a part of me that's deeply ashamed to be a psychologist at the moment. I'm so appalled by my compatriots. They know that this gender dysphoria pathology is a lie. They all know it. And they won't say anything. Now, partly they won't say anything because the consequences for saying something are not trivial. But the consequences for not saying anything is that people like Chloe Cole end up with their breasts cut off when they're 15.
Right.
Right. Well, that actually matters.
Right.
So practically speaking, in a sense, the battle doesn't mean anything to me because I'm fighting to remain a member of a club that I don't really want to be part of.
And if he's right, if John Marco Allegro is right, it all kind of makes sense that these people were having these experiences much like the Greeks were with the Eleusinian mysteries, much like multiple different cultures in the Amazon, all over the world have experienced these profound ceremony experiences that lead to these journeys into the spirit world, these connections with higher consciousness, this something that when you're experiencing it seems very, very real, but also very preposterous when you try to explain it to people that aren't experienced. You know, it's like Hendrix. Like, are you experienced? Have you ever been experienced? Well, I have. Like, it's that. Like, with that understanding that that's possible, the world changes. Because now you know that that's possible. You could live your whole life and not know that the most shocking, profound thing in existence is 3 hits away. 3 hits away. And all of a sudden, you're in a completely different universe in 20, 30 seconds. That's nuts. And the fact that that is dismissed, that people look at it as like, oh, you're just escaping reality, and you're like, it might be the source of civilization itself. It might be the source of language. It might be the source of the expansion of the human mind over a period of 2 million years, the doubling of the human brain over a period of 2 million years. I think we're in a weird place in society where the term drug is a blanket, and it covers things that have vastly different effects. It covers caffeine, it covers nicotine, and it covers dimethyltryptamine, which is crazy. It's crazy that all those things are drugs. Adderall's a drug. Benzodiazepine is a drug. Xanax, there's a million of them. They're all different, and they're all drugs. And the idea that psychedelics are a drug, for lack of a better term, that's what we use. I don't think that's what they are at all. I think they are probably why we became people. I think they are probably why society advanced. And I think every great ancient culture probably celebrated them and used them. It seems like there's so much evidence out of Egypt of the use of psilocybin, various different drugs, various different psychedelic experiences, the iconography of the pineal gland seems to be a big part of multiple cultures, not just Egyptian, but even Catholicism. If you go to the Vatican, there's this enormous pine cone that is a statue there.
We're going to approach that in 2 ways. So we'll offer certification at different time spans. You know, generally it takes you 4 years to get a degree, but you could imagine that it would be useful to have a 1-year certificate, a 2-year certificate, a 3-year certificate, a 4-year certificate. Like, there's no compelling reason why it has to be 4 years. We'll keep very detailed records of our students' academic progress, and they'll be able to offer them directly to employers. So we want to be able to assure employers that anybody who's gone through the certification process that's part and parcel of Peterson Academy has done the work and met the standards, and the standards will be high. Now, simultaneously, we're working on technical accreditation so that we can have this operate as a standard university. There's trade-offs on that because the accreditation processes themselves are captured by the same forces that have captured the universities. And we're not going to compromise the quality of the offerings by kowtowing to accreditation processes that are producing the same problem that we're trying to address.
Right.
Now, I'm in discussion with a number of different jurisdictions to move accreditation forward, and if that happens, it can also be applied retroactively. So if we can figure out how to do it with an administration or a jurisdiction that's willing to do it, and we don't have to compromise the quality, then we'll go the classic accreditation route. Otherwise, I'm just going to go directly to employers and say, look, we're going to be very, very careful about who we grant certification to. And you'll be able to rely on the certification from Peterson Academy as an indication of intellectual ability and also work ethic. And we'll document that by the record-keeping process that we use as part and parcel of the platform. Get rid of the corrupt motivation. Get rid of it. Pray for the salvation of your soul, that you're aiming right, because your aim is going to determine the content of your thoughts. And that is how it works technically. That's how it works neuropsychologically. Your thoughts are the handmaiden of your aim.
Right, which is why we're always worried about sociopaths, because they never abandoned that corrupt motivation.
Yeah, well, they're basically the best way to think about the narcissists and the hedonists and the histrionic types and the borderlines and the antisocial personalities is that they never matured cortically. So, like, children come into the world in a way as a bundle of competing subcortical motivations, right? And they're very powerful motivations. Anger, for example, you watch a 2-year-old have a temper tantrum, it's quite the show. And they want short-term immediate gratification. Now, what happens as your cortex matures, you transcend those lower order instinctual motivations, that would be the Freudian id, and you start to regulate your behavior in relationship to your own future. So you stop doing stupid, pleasurable things in the moment that will compromise you, and you start to be able to incorporate the views of other people. That's how kids at 3 start to develop the ability to have friends. And the more sophisticated you get, the more other people and their perspectives are part of your perceptions, and the more the future is taken into account in your actions. And so you could say that what happened in the 1960s, and this is relevant to the psychedelic experience, let's say, is that the emergence of mushrooms in particular, and then LSD, indicated to a swath of the population, like Leary and like Ken Kesey, that our perceptions were locked in kind of a box, in a box that we weren't even conscious of. I suppose that's the box of conformity. And the psychedelics released a wave of nonconformity. And Leary crystallized that with his tune in, turn on, and drop out. Now, there was a major problem with that, and that was partly what led to the kickback. So you might say that the first stage of something approximating a religious revelation is the understanding that your perceptions have been constrained by forms of conformity that were so extensive that you didn't even understand them. You didn't even know they were there. And so you're freed from that. And then maybe the first response to that is the celebration of an unlimited hedonistic freedom. But the problem with that is that freedom from constraint and hedonism is not freedom. It's just subjugation to a kind of instinctive chaos. And that emerged with the hippie culture. And Leary in particular made a huge mistake when he said tune in, turn on, and drop out.